Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 38 for season 4, which is 2017. Probably, maybe the last episode, second last episode of the year. We might do one more next week, or I don't know. We're going to do it New Year's Eve, I think, or Christmas Eve. Anyway, we're getting towards the end of the year. To be confirmed. This week, joined by Vickers and Zeev, which you would well know if you listen to the show. We're also joined by a special guest. We're joined by Clinton Mead, who is the very first Liberal Democrats politician. We won't hold that against him. Well, the Liberal Democrats is fine. The politician bit is what we might hold against him. He's in Sydney. Welcome along, Clinton.
Hello. Hello all.
So we've got 3 topics today. We're going to talk about the Bennelong by-election. We're going to talk about the MYEFO, which is just a stupid name, I think, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Because politics can be stupid, and that's fine. And we're going to talk about the Victorian, just like insanity about infrastructure and just complete disregard for logic and reason and sense. So let's talk about Bennelong first. John Alexander turns out he wasn't a crypto Brit, but he resigned under a cloud of potentially being a breacher of Section 44, the Constitution. So triggered a by-election. Labor and Christina Keneally, who's the former Labor PM, and she lost. And,
not PM, Premier.
Sorry, Premier. Sorry, Premier. And John Alexander lost. He won with a slightly reduced majority. I think he got like 55% of the votes, as opposed to like I think 59. So yes, Vickers, go for it.
Yeah, so I've actually found the Labour spin on this quite interesting because they've been saying, oh look, she reduced the loss. She reduced the swing to the Liberals by 4%. By 5%. At which point I basically say, you realise how angry that electorate is with John Alexander, right? Because they were forced to go to a by-election and found out they didn't have to, right? Because he wasn't a crypto Brit. And on top of that, you had Malcolm Turnbull with a saying to a large Chinese, actually, I think they might be the largest ethnic voter base in that electorate. But they were telling, we don't want Chinese influence and all of this other stuff in our politics. So, I mean, there was a real strong backlash, probably equivalent to what was experienced in 2007 in that electorate. But Labour pretty much lost it because they picked Christina Keneally. Right? They could have probably won it if they had picked anyone else. I don't know.
Well, what makes you think? Yeah. What makes you think that? Like, just anyone else? Like, perhaps they found a particular local candidate, maybe. But what makes you think that Christine Keneally was particularly that and that the Liberals would have got 10% swing against them? I think that's a big call to make. I'm not disagreeing with you, but how can you be confident about that?
Considering it went to 13% in 2007, so I mean it's not unheard of. But the other thing is, yes. I was saying the main reason why I think so, and because look, that area is the place I went to university at. It's basically the place I grew up in. And during my time of going there, and meeting with people I grew up with, essentially. And these are people that voted for John Howard up until 2007. It was a very similar sort of feel amongst them, where they really weren't happy with John Alexander and the way that he brought the conditions that occurred. They also the Chinese community was also on the heel of the Dasha thing. So the Liberals basically trying to counter for Dasha had basically thrown the Chinese business community in Epping and Eastwood and all these places in Bennelong under the bus. So there was a feeling of resentment against the Liberal Party in that electorate at that point in time, at the grassroots level at least. But like I said, they picked Christina Keneally. You have to realise in the New South Wales context, Christina Keneally presided over the biggest Labor loss in recent history. Yep. She's pretty much one of the things you'll hear her constantly say is that ICAC called her an exemplary witness. Now the question is, why did you have to be a witness? And in her case, she was the one that promoted Ian MacDonald and what was his other name, Eddie Obeid. Yeah, 2 people that ICAC recommended for what do you call it? Criminal charges. So I mean, she has a lot of baggage, particularly related to corruption in the New South Wales Labor Party associated with her. And no matter how much she wants to say, I was an exemplar witness, people are always going to ask, why did you have to be the witness? You didn't have to promote them in the first place.
I just find it hard to believe that Labor, wanting to win this by-election, presumably, because it would put a lot of pressure on the Liberal government, would not have picked in the focus groups and the polling that they would have done before selecting a candidate that Christina Keneally was so poisonous in the electorate. It was important for them to win this. They can always just put her in the Senate, which they're going to do anyway. Why would they risk Keneally if she was as poisonous as you suggest? I find that hard to believe. Why would they throw away a bunch?
They did. Yeah, but then again, I have no faith in focus group testing in general. I mean, you guys did that in the Liberal Party. In the LDP. You guys went with the anti-PC and you didn't pick up anything because, I mean, anyone could have told you if you're competing in a small crowd, you're basically competing against Pauline Hanson, and Pauline Hanson is going to be far more racist and objectionable than the LDP ever could be. So she picked up the votes. I mean, anyone could have told you that, and your focus group testing didn't tell you.
Look, I'm going to disagree here slightly because, first of all, the fact that there might be that ill feeling in the Chinese business community doesn't necessarily mean that the broader Chinese community has heard that message.
That's a good point.
Simply because the broader Chinese community, like everyone else, are just going about their daily lives and they don't hear what the political obsessives like you and I and everyone else on this show hear. They don't. Most people don't. The next point to make is, given that that's the case, and given that it's a traditional Liberal seat, I think it's just a product, not necessarily of Keneally being unpopular, just of a swing in a by-election that wasn't enough to unseat the local candidate, but there's always a swing in the by-election. I just don't know if there's enough information to go farther than that.
I mean, it's probably also worth mentioning that, back in 2007, which was, when the Labor won it off the Liberals, they ran Maxine McHugh, who was an ABC host. So it's not like it's, I don't know in the intervening election who they ran, but I presume it's the kind of electorate that's always going to draw a certain kind of maybe celebrity candidate. And, this was, we've had the New England by-election, but this is, like getting a celebrity to sign up to be the candidate for the New England by-election is different from one that's actually in Sydney.
John Alexander's also a celebrity. Keep that in mind.
He's a tennis.
So just remember. By the way, this probably really needs to be stamped out. The idea that Bennelong is a safe Liberal seat. John Howard made it a safe Liberal seat. When he took it over, it was a marginal seat. Just keep that in mind.
Well, I mean, this according to what I'm reading right now, the Liberal primary vote is the lowest on record in Bennelong's 68-year history, including the 2007 election, and he got 45% of the vote. That's of the primary vote. That's a pretty good, Liberal seat. If the lowest the Liberals have ever got is 45%.
45% is actually pretty appalling if you think about it. It implies a massive swing away from the Liberals, not towards Labor, but from the Liberals.
Oh, sure. I mean, they lost 7% of their primary vote. So yeah, they got crunched in this election, and some of that would have gone to the Australian Conservatives. I mean, the Christian Democrats also got hammered, so that would explain. I mean, they got 5%, but yeah. I mean, they lost.
You mean the Conservatives got 4%?
Yeah. So the Australian Conservatives got 5. What is it? They got 4.3%.
Yeah,
pretty good. For the first time in the seat.
It's respectable for a minor party.
Yeah, and Christian Democrats.
Well, for their first 3%. Run, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But but that's the thing. I don't think Australian Conservatives went in trying to take Liberal Party votes. Instead, they ended up taking CDP votes, which actually isn't quite surprising.
Well, I mean, they've.
What makes you think that they were focusing on taking Liberal Party votes? See, what I see the Australian Conservatives, their main tactic is to consolidate the Christian Conservative vote, which has until recently been very split. That's why they've merged with Family First. And it looks like, if they keep going, especially if Fred Nile drops off the perch at some point or doesn't want to be involved in New South Wales politics anymore, they may well take up all of the CDP vote eventually as well. But indeed, based on how they did it at Bennelong, you'll see, I think, Australian Conservatives comfortably. It's hard to go extend those results across the state, but it's quite possible they'll comfortably get an MLC next election, and the Christian Democrats may be struggling if that sort of result is repeated across the state.
Sure.
So, I think that's their main sort of focus. Of course, they'd like to grow into a bigger party and get Lib voters, and of course that's what they say they're doing. But I think their first focus is to consolidate the Conservative vote.
I mean, I don't know what Cory Bernardi's movements have been in the last 6 weeks, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was going around talking to people in Bennelong. Like, it's a good opportunity. I mean, that's the thing about any by-election, is it draws a lot of attention from everybody, and everybody can devote resources to a particular seat that they may not be able to normally sort of marshal. So for minor parties, by-elections are a good time for them to try and shine, because they can focus on trying to have a good showing in one seat, where when you've got 150 seats, it's hard to sort of have that sort of attention in all of them. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cory Bernardi was going around drumming up support in Bennelong. So anyway,
so you asked.
Sorry, go Vickers.
Yes. So you asked the question, why did I think they were targeting the Liberal votes? Because their tagline was literally "Vote for a real Liberal in Parliament." That was on their poster. Every last one of their posters.
Yep.
In Bennelong.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense.
Well, that implies that they're targeting the anti-same-sex marriage vote, because
correct.
They ticked off at John Alexander for voting for it.
Yeah.
I think.
No. Don't get me wrong. They're really targeting the strong Conservative vote, but they were definitely targeting Liberal voters for sure.
Probably. Yeah. Mix of both.
All right. Well, we've probably covered that as much as we really can. Let's talk about the mid-year economic forecast. Mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. I screwed up that thing, which is basically sort of a mini budget that happens towards the end of the year. They've announced that the deficit's going to be basically $6 billion smaller than according to forecasts in May, and they've got a bunch of sort of savings measures. Savings measures. I always got to put the air quotes, because sometimes it's not savings measures, sometimes it's just taxes. I guess they're still rolling some of these announcements out, but they're looking to find another $2 billion to improve the budget situation. So
what's the total saving projected?
The total, so hang on, where is it? So savings measures include finding $2 billion. How much did?
It's pretty vague. The reports I've seen are something like a net reduction of 23 billion debt, but over what time period is that? I'm not quite sure. And it will include...
It should be over the 4-year estimate.
Yeah. And then on top of that, they've also got some cuts to universities of about $2 billion that they will do by basically imposing what appear to be caps on uni intake again. And it is over the 4-year period.
Yep. So if it's 22 billion over 4 years, that's about 5 billion a year. It's about 1.2% of the budget, which is basically a rounding error.
Yeah. Well, they're saying it's basically because of better economic growth figures and better receipts coming in.
Which is always the rubberiest of the numbers. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like,
nobody really knows exactly how much the economy will grow.
Exactly. So, and you know, that, like, you've always got to assume that their figures are biased towards a higher number rather than a lower number. So
I don't know, Clinton. What do you reckon?
Yeah. And well, none of these really matter unless they can actually get them through without legislation or even regulation changes.
The uni changes apparently are going to be by way of just the government acting by itself. There's no need to get it past the Senate, in part. So
Well, yeah. So that's what I think I read that about the university savings. Because even if they can just do it through regulation, the Senate can still block a regulation change.
Yeah.
But I believe they can get away with the uni sort of savings, because I think what they're doing is it must be set up in law so that the you need a regulation to increase with inflation, and they'll just not do that, and you can't block someone from not doing something. So hopefully they'll be able to get those through the Senate without being blocked by the Senate. But the rest of the things, well, it just especially whether it be the 1.3 they're talking about from removing welfare for new migrants. If Labor and the Greens block it, they've got Buckley's chance of getting it through, getting all the other crossbenchers together.
Do they really?
I wouldn't have thought that at all. I mean, the crossbench seems pretty friendly for sticking it to the migrants. The foreign.
The majority, but still, they need 9 out of 10 or something. So it just takes Xenophon.
I don't know if Nick Xenophon is going to sign up to that, and Labor's a big question mark too.
Labor might back it though anyway, just neutralise the issue.
They might.
No,
so it might get that through, but there's a lot of things in here. I wonder if they get more through.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is what was the cutting welfare for migrants proposed to save?
Like $1.3 billion. So basically, they're delaying certain payments by 3. Like when you arrive, you got to wait 3 years to get certain payments. Which, I mean, David Leyonhjelm came out in support of that, or at least the Liberal. I think. And it's not a terrible idea.
Okay, so they're saying, hang on. So the proposal is meant to save. Okay, I'm just trying to calculate this out.
$1.2 billion
over 4 years.
I presume so. Yes.
That is a fucking tiny number.
It is a very tiny number.
Yeah. There's about 12 billion a year going to non-citizen welfare, which isn't going to citizens of foreign countries where we have mutual agreements. So we could cut all that out without. But what is that? That's a tiny fraction. But
what is the 12 billion calculation from? Because there's very few programs which allow anything really.
There's a report. Leyonhjelm got the budgetary office to do a report on the amount of welfare going to non-citizens, and I can't remember what it includes, but you can get the report. It's whatever.
By the way, I mean, when we're talking about welfare, it is like a broader.
But some of that, about 15% of that, was to citizens from countries where we have mutual agreements to provide. I think, for example, the UK, and I believe, and there's a few other countries too. So New Zealand, yeah. So if you take them out, you end up with 12 billion, which we're not sort of obliged to under treaties in welfare to non-citizens.
I'm just wondering how broad your definition of welfare has become there, because having come through,
it covers family tax benefits, for example.
Okay, so family tax
benefit and welfare. Yeah, I imagine it'd be those at least.
Yeah. And bear that in mind. That's basically a discount on your tax. It may not be the best discount. Best design discount on tax, but it is a discount on tax.
Yeah,
it's not a welfare.
That's not a welfare program. Yeah.
It is depending on your definition, because family tax benefit can provide you with more cash than you pay in income tax.
Okay, but if you
depending on your income.
Yeah.
And I don't know. We'll have to have a look into. You'd have to look in the report about actually.
I don't think that would be very common. Okay.
Just.
I think it's very. I'm not aware of family tax benefit ending up. I know that it can go positive, but I know it can go positive, but that's with stuff from Centrelink as well. My understanding of family tax benefit was it basically reduced your tax threshold to 0. It didn't hand you cash. Like to get cash, you had to go to Centrelink.
No, family tax benefit you can get cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm not commenting on that because I don't know the intricacies.
Centrelink administers it. They hand it out. They do the administration. But yes, you can get cash from it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the whole point.
Anyway.
Particularly family tax benefit Part B, which is particularly designed for dual income families. Well, when you actually have family tax benefit Part B, I think you can only get in a full amount if your income's under $20,000. So it's primarily the big family tax benefit is for people sort of with low incomes or on welfare.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that needs to be unpacked at some stage, I'm sure.
Yeah. But bear in mind, this changes for basically people accessing those benefits. They can do it after 2 years here but if they change it, it'll be 3 years. So, they'll have to live here 3 years before they access these benefits. So it's not exactly a monumental change to current, working or living conditions for migrants in Australia. It's pretty. I mean, it's relatively marginal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, the only way you'd be saving money is if people leave within 3 years. Like, otherwise, it's just, if migrants arrive and they stay for 5 years, well then, or, for, like, permanently or whatever, like, it doesn't really, it's not a huge, it doesn't change the fundamental structure of the programs.
I do wonder how they've came to that. I didn't realise that, Steve, that they've only changed 2 years to 3, and they're claiming $1.2 billion. I wonder how they come to those figures, because how they estimate how many extra people who haven't taken welfare for the first 2 years they've been here would take welfare if they couldn't the third. Like, if someone
maybe they're just counting the people who get it on the second year and somehow using that as a go on, Vickers.
So I said what I think they're basing it on. So this happens a lot, particularly with 457 visas. Is families will come in, a employer will bring the entire family across, because 457s are actually quite expensive. So they just bring the entire family across. The entire family lives and works here for 2 years, and then they go home.
Yep.
Which would how would that contribute to this $1.2 billion figure? That's why the question is, how do they come across this $1.2 billion figure?
Well, say you hear
it's a guesstimate. We don't know exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I think we'll have to leave it at that.
All government budget
it's an unknown
estimate.
Yeah.
Speaking of something that's not unknown, the Victorian government is wasting money. Shock horror.
Yeah.
So
this is from the government that started by paying $1 billion not to build a road.
Yeah.
You're saying that they're wasting money. Okay.
So basically,
can I have a rant on this one to start with?
Yeah. Well, do you want me to explain, or do you want to explain?
I'm happy to explain it.
You go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Thanks. So basically, what's happened is that in 2014, the Labor government of the day promised to remove 50 level crossings if it was elected into power, and so it did. Okay, so it commenced that operation. It promised to do it in 4 years up until the next one, basically, or not all of them, but a large amount certainly in that 4-year time gap. And it promised to do that. It later turned out. First of all, without reviewing which were the priority level crossing removals in the state, because studies have been performed about this, and then it promised to do it without conducting a cost-benefit analysis, and then it went ahead and did it anyway. So what's come out now is an Auditor General's report, which said, well, actually, you did the cost-benefit analysis 2 years late, and it turned out that it would be a money loser. And then it turned out that you picked, of those 50 level crossing removals across the state, level crossings, by the way, where a train passes the roads, basically. So
we don't really have them anywhere else.
Well, we do in Victoria, so it creates a bit of delay. Sometimes, if only one train or two passes an hour, it's pretty trivial. But in some electorates, there are level crossings that can take, 10, 15 minutes out of people's day as trains just pass by again and again during peak hour. And in those electorates, it was very, very popular to remove these crossings. The problem is, though, that it turns out that there had been a review before the Labor government was elected of the priority removals. There were about 30 crossings that had to be removed, right, or were identified as priorities. The remaining 20, which the Labor government chose, were just chosen for no apparent reason at all. They weren't a priority.
Oh, well, they probably chose for a very specific reason.
They were an electoral priority.
Yeah,
that's why
someone to cut a ribbon.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. And they kept on with it regardless, okay? They kept on with the entire project. All of the crossings were going to be removed regardless. And to add to that, on top of that, the initial estimate for all of the removal projects was about $5 billion. It's now up to $8 billion. So, $1 billion here, $3 billion there, and soon we're talking about real money, guys. I mean, I just feel as if this might be going a little far. What else can I say? I mean, this is the people removing it have hired CFMEU Labor staff, so that's always good to know. The traffic wardens, by the way, because I commute past this area, there's like 2 traffic wardens to 1 traffic sign, and there's like, I just don't get that at all. This is just a personal anecdotal experience because I see it all the time. It's like 2 people with 1 stop sign because of the traffic. It doesn't make any sense. That's just a personal side. The point is, it's a bloody waste of money. And it just boggles the mind that it's happened.
Tell us how you really feel, Ziv.
I mean, this is like absolutely true in Western Australia. So we had an election in the last year, and there's a lot of the central kind of debate was over train projects and infrastructure projects, which for a lot of state governments that's their bread and butter. Like that's all they really have. They're all the ribbons they get to cut because education and health is so much tied into the feds. And they're building this for like a train station. It's like 2 kilometers long, and it's costing $2 billion because they're doing it mostly underground. And of course, it's going to the airport because that's what every city needs is a train to the airport that no one ever uses. So it's just governments.
What?
What?
What? I'm just
And
like trying
rail
to.
link.
The airport rail link in Brisbane and the one in Sydney get huge use.
Yeah, but do they actually make their money back?
Well, I imagine the one in Sydney does because it charges a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And plus, it's Sydney Airport.
Yeah, well. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like,
which is why anyone in Sydney that's anywhere near the airport doesn't use it because it's just as cheap to get an Uber.
Yeah. I mean, it's like $20 or something.
So if you're out sort of in the west, you might use the airport link. But if you're anywhere within 15 kilometres of the airport,
you won't touch it.
Yeah, well, I paid $20 to get a train or $25 for an Uber, and I'm not that close to the airport. So, I'd rather get dropped off at the door than for $5 extra than lug my bags up after a train station and whatnot.
It's $230 to my parents' place, so clearly I've got to use the train.
I mean, it's none of these projects are very rarely done with cost-benefit analysis. In fact, they're just about to open a new stadium in Perth. It's like $1 billion. I went looking for a business case. I went looking for a cost-benefit study. They can never. No,
you'll never get those.
No,
we've got Saving New South Wales. We've got $2 billion on the stadium. New stadium.
Well, you guys are going to demolish yours. I mean, that's
to
the crazy
reveal
thing.
the perfectly functioning stadium. That's just even more crazy. I can understand. I can kind of understand the rationale for removing a level crossing because that impedes traffic flow. But this is just demolishing one stadium to replace it with a slightly bigger one. I just don't get that. That is just people with too much money on their hands just blowing it away like it's confetti. But leaving that aside.
Truth be told, people in Sydney might be on board with that because they want one that's bigger than Etihad Stadium.
Wow. Well, that's sad. But leaving that point aside, I think there's an important one that needs to be made as well about cost-benefit studies as well, because the cost-benefit study here was performed 2 years after the fact and after construction commenced. So, first of all, it was irrelevant, and yet it was still done. Second of all, the supposed return to taxpayers was judged at 78 cents to the dollar spent, right? I'm not quite sure what that means, but if you break it down, it basically means that they've guesstimated the traffic and the broader economic benefits that will come from removing these level crossings, and somehow they've arrived at this magic figure of 78 cents to the dollar. And if you think about that for a moment, it is just pure fantasy, because nobody knows how much economic benefit these level crossing removals will have, and nobody knows exactly how much traffic will benefit as a result of the removals. Okay, it's not going to be measured. It's just this wild guess that they're throwing into the air to go through the motions of having an analysis of the costs and benefits of these projects. Yeah. And the thing is, these projects will never really be assessed thoroughly unless and until they're done. And here it is again, for profit by an interested company that is taking a realistic guess at what the traffic forecast will be. And even then, that will be a really difficult exercise. It will be a flip of a coin, because this is a massive bet that society will change and drift to accommodate increased traffic flows. I would be very wary as an investor of investing in this kind of project, because it is a massive guess, in my opinion. But at least it's an educated guess that a company would make, and would only make, hopefully, if there were a real expected profit to be made. But this kind of, on a whim and a prayer, just remove it because it's electorally popular. Never mind the train goes by only, a few times in an hour during peak time. It's craziness.
There's actually a really great episode of Econ Talk where Rush Roberts interviews a guy who wrote a book on large projects. I think he basically looked at anything that was over $1 billion to build. And this particular book or article, I can't remember if it was a paper or if it was a book. But anyway, he came to the conclusion that actually the private sector doesn't have that much better of a track record than governments do.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, because it's just inherently difficult to understand.
Because the guesswork is so profoundly difficult. Imagine, you've got to guess about how hundreds of thousands of people are going to interact as a result of this project. It's impossible. If that could be done properly, governments would be working fine, right? Because that's what governments do all the time. They try to assess how hundreds of thousands of people will interact in complex transactions. Yep. It's just not how real life works.
Well, the benefit of the private sector of doing it is they go out of business. You can only make those sorts of mistakes once.
They try to minimise costs. Exactly. They try to minimise costs. They bear the loss. Those are the two main benefits.
Don't do that.
Okay, they're not going to throw money away on 4 unnecessary traffic wardens where only one will do the job. Yep. They're not going to throw away money on the CFMEU, given
the choice.
A proper industrial relations environment where they actually have the choice. That's not going to happen. But other than that, these are massive projects with massive risks.
Clinton,
I would
say
actually.
Something? Do you want to make the final comment and then we'll wrap things up?
Who, me?
Clinton, yeah.
I was going to say, you said that the private sector isn't as good at assessing is about similarly as good at assessing these risks as the government. But I suggest that a lot of, you're talking about Zeev actually predicting these future where people are going to live, where the traffic's going to be. Well, a lot of that depends on government policy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps the reason why the government historically has done no worse than private sector is because they got inside information, or they can actually change their policy later on to actually look at their investments,
which makes it
look better than they. Whereas you've got a private sector developer, if NIMBYs come up and refuse and politically stop a development happening, well then their development won't be making the return, but the government doesn't really care because it's not making their budget line look badly. So. That may be why the private sector finds it so difficult, not necessarily because they're just not good at it.
And as against that, and very briefly, it should be mentioned, I suppose, that at least in Japan, private sector transportation, including the very fast trains that the Greens and Labor all like to talk about, seems to be functioning quite profitably, and investment seems to be carrying on without any issues. So it is also a product of density as well, I suppose, which we just don't have in our cities.
And perhaps Japan doesn't have that sort of NIMBY element, which politically just kind of mucks up. I don't know about Japanese culture and political culture, but if they don't have that sort of NIMBY element that just mucks up sort of city planning, then it's more predictable in the private sector. They can invest knowing that they're going to get predictable results.
They definitely do have an NB culture. The only difference is Japan's population is declining, so it doesn't actually matter that they've stalled, growth because
Okay.
All right. Well, on that point, I think we'll leave it for this week, and we'll hopefully be back in the next couple of weeks to do a year in review, talk about some of the big stories, and definitely early next year we're going to do probably the first year of Trump. So I suspect we'll have maybe spend an hour and just.
That'll be on the 20th of August.
Yes, it'll. January.
Sorry, January.
I'm like,
of January.
More than yeah. Well, that's it. So early next year, that'll be on the agenda. So
yeah. No, because the 20th is when he was inaugurated, so we should do year and that. We'll probably make it live. We should do it live.
Yeah.
It's only been a year, has it?
Yeah.
It's like longer than that.
Can't believe there's gonna be another 3 years.
Like O'Reilly, we'll do it live.
I know, 3 more years of winning. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Then we'll probably have Bernie.
All right. Dear. Well, thanks, Clinton, for joining us, and thanks to all the listeners. Don't forget you can like and share and subscribe. Facebook, YouTube, and yeah. Also, we did a live. Vickers and I did a live stream, which will be up on our YouTube, of us playing Counter-Strike Go really badly. Well, I was playing badly. He was playing lots better than me, and talking about politics. So. All right. Thanks, everyone.